So then, the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Let's have a bit of a talk about it. Let's talk about the two different races we had because it was a sprint weekend. And let's talk about some of the storylines that have come out of it. So let's start off with the winner, Lando Norris, who's just dedicated the win to Jules de Ferran. It's a nice thing for him to do. For Norris, it was a quiet weekend, wasn't it? Just calmly, pole position, win, whilst his teammates struggled elsewhere. And I think the thing is, and I've been trying to suss this for a while, because for all of the allegations that there are about British bias within various different media, I don't think that exists when it comes to Norris. I think people talk more about his teammate Piastri. I've been trying to figure out why. And the best way to describe it is, God forbid for somebody who's talking about motorsports, politics. You know, he's just competently doing things. He just gets on and does it. A similar image that our now Prime Minister Keir Starmer had during the general election last year. Part of why he won. And part of why, when Starmer won his election, he managed to, with barely a third of the popular vote, get nearly 2/3 of the seats in Parliament. He just quietly did it. It helped that his rivals were imploding or collapsing or weren't able to fully carry their momentum through. And that's the thing for Lando Norris. He's not going out there and stealing the headlines. I mean, he got the Grand Slam in Mexico, and that felt like an almost nothing burger of a thing. But Lando was there. He was able to get the performance out of the car, and he was able to just win. Just drove it carefully. And yes, there will be fans who will say, if it wasn't for the engine failure in Zandvoort, look, it doesn't matter. His championship lead now is, 24 points. If it wasn't for that engine failure in Zandvoort, it would be 40. Yeah. But if it wasn't for that engine failure in Zandvoort, maybe Piastri wouldn't have done what he did at Baku. Or Kota. Or Lando wouldn't have done what he did in Singapore. It's all much for muchness of whataboutism. What's better to focus on is, how impressive that run was. And let's briefly talk about Piastri if you guys listening don't hear something go crashing through my ceiling, judging by the whirring sounds I hear just above me right now. Piastri had a bit of an unlucky weekend. I mean, the crash on the curbs in the sprint reminds me of how I've fallen foul of it in iRacing. Piastri does a lot of iRacing, but iRacing, especially in Formula cars, doesn't tend to happen in the wet so much. So it's one of those things of just don't touch the curbs in the wet. He wasn't the only one caught out in that moment even. We saw Hulkenberg, who managed to recover, and Colapinto, who had an even worse smash. But I think the big talking point is going to be that 10-second penalty, which, if Piastri didn't have, he would be in second. And McLaren probably would have played a different strategy anyways. I think that 10 seconds was harsh. I really do. I don't know if he got it because he locked up, and that's seen as what set off the entire chain reaction. If he hadn't locked up, he still would have collided with Antonelli. I think if you are going to put the blame on somebody, you don't put it on Antonelli for not expecting Piastri to be there and instead reacting to Leclerc and going further over to the left. No. But the thing is, that was what happened. To me, it would be a racing incident. It felt like the stewards were judging more on the outcome, the fact that Leclerc was out, rather than what Piastri actually did. Because lock-up or no lock-up, Kimi was turning in. In fact, it's probably better that Piastri locked up, because if he didn't, he may have gone into the side pod. And that would have potentially been all three of them out. And what would happen then? The stewards would give Piastri a grid drop for Vegas? I'm not so sure. So if it was that this verdict hinged on the lockup, I'd want to know why. And the thing is, it does somewhat overshadow what was an interesting rest of the top 5. Verstappen in third, having started in the pit lane. If anyone's going to do it, and especially around Brazil, it's going to be Max Verstappen. Whilst he was sandwiched between the two Mercs, Antonelli getting the most of Russell this weekend. And Antonelli has been really good around here. I don't know if it's something to do with flat surfaces, because that is something that the ground effect era has benefited Mercedes. But Antonelli seems to do well at the flatter tracks, as in the ones with a smoother surface as well. Which I would say this diamond grooved track from Sao Paulo does have. I'd say it's very similar to what we see in Vegas, in Canada, in Miami. And those are tracks that have performed well for the Mercs. They're ones that Russell has performed very well at. But they're also ones that it seems do really well if you're Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Elsewhere, let's go through the rest of the field. That battle towards the tail end of the top 10, covering P7 through 12. I wish they'd covered a bit more on screen because it looked absolutely wonderful and would have been a bit more exciting than watching Verstappen fail to pass Antonelli or Piastri fail to pass Russell. But I get big teams, top places, TV direction wants to stick there. Behind Ollie Behrman, who he was in a no man's land for P6, which is incredibly impressive. He's just been having such a great run of form recently. You had Lawson and Hadger, then Hulkenberg just behind, then Gasly getting points for Alpine again. He got points in both races this weekend. Granted, in both cases, it was because of something happening around him involving Saubers. This time it was Hulkenberg carrying him along. In the sprint, it was Bortoletto's massive accident. But hey, good for Alpine. It's not going to help them out of 10th right now, but points are points are points. He managed to hold off Albon, who held off Ocon, who very nearly speared into Albon down at the final proper corner of the race. Sainz was behind them, and as was Alonso and Colapinto. Most of that remaining pack was in a train with only Tsunoda off the back after penalties and so on. But I feel I've talked enough about this race. It was a fun Sao Paulo Grand Prix. It was a fun sprint weekend as well, and it made the most of the format. We've got one left for Losail for Qatar. 3 races left. If Norris wants to be champion, he just needs to finish second in all of them. He doesn't need to win now until the end of the season. If Piastri wins all of them, Norris just needs to follow him home and he'll be world champion. It is a tall order. I'd say right now it's probably actually a taller order for Piastri. Because Qatar, yeah, that's probably more Lando's place. No, more Oscar's even. Abu Dhabi is Lando's. Even though last season we didn't get to see much of Oscar because Verstappen just ploughed into him T1. But I would have said Vegas, despite Lando's massive accident a couple of years ago, is much more Lando's kind of thing. That said, Verstappen exists. And also for Vegas, the Mercs do. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below though, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, it's bye for now.